Ilham is a finance professional and emerging non-executive director. Fun fact is that she has a teaching diploma from Trinity College London in speech and drama and theatre arts, and has served as a news producer and program presenter on national television. Ilham, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Thank you, Claire. As you mentioned, I am a finance professional, specifically a chartered accountant with an MBA from the University of Manchester. I also have an honours degree in business administration. I started my career with one of the big four accounting firms, Ernst & Young, where I worked in assurance services as an auditor and in management consultancy. Thereafter, I worked in accounting and finance roles in various sectors spanning countries from Asia, Africa, Middle East to Australia. Prior to coming to Brisbane, I was based in Dubai, and I was fortunate to serve in the Richemont Group, which is the second largest luxury goods group in the world, which owns brands such as Cartier, Montblanc, Piaget, Van Cleef & Arpels, and 20 plus high-end luxury brands. I was in charge of the accounting and finance function for the regional office, which covered the Middle East, North Africa, India, and I reported to head office in Geneva. It was fascinating to work in that environment, surrounded by all these luxury brands, and to find out about the history and the story and the heritage behind these brands, to know their positioning strategies, and not to mention to see firsthand the exquisite craftsmanship and the sheer beauty of these pieces. So it made my work not so mundane, I would say. Dubai is also special and close to my heart because we had our first daughter there, first child, before we arrived in Brisbane. As you mentioned, I also have a great passion for the theatre and an interest in public speaking. And I pursued this fairly seriously, and I have a teacher's diploma from the Trinity College in this area. And although it may seem quite polar opposites, finance and the theatre, I would say I embrace the duality of these two disciplines. And it helps me keep myself grounded and gives me a sense of balance. And when I approach different decisions or situations, I feel it gives me a deeper perception of things because I have that creative study and creative input into the work I do. It's sort of the yin and the yang within me. And it's interesting how I got into both these fields. Often they say parents have a considerable influence in their children's careers and the choices they make. So my father was a chartered accountant, and he went on to become the Auditor General, and my mother is a speech and drama teacher. So it panned out in my life that I took to both their professions. And whilst growing up, I was heavily influenced by numbers, mathematics, rational thinking, and all things left brain related, but also immersed in creativity and the arts. And I remember from a very young age, it was impressed upon me the power of the spoken word, not just in debating and giving persuasive speeches, but also we used to just recite poetry for the sheer enjoyment of it. And that has a huge influence even now in my life. And I think as a woman, not just to succeed, but to survive in the corporate world, you should be able to speak confidently and articulate your position. And of course, in the boardroom, it paves the way for confident contributions. Now, coming back to the present, I serve on the board of Australian Parents Council, and very recently I retired from the board of one of Queensland's largest independent schools. I have my own consultancy firm, and I find governance work exciting and very rewarding.
And so what prompted you to join Women on Boards?
So, interestingly, I got into governance work quite by chance when I was approached in 2019, and the proposition was made for me to consider joining the board of John Paul College. So I did take it up and surprised myself by appearing for the elections at the annual general meeting, and I got voted in amongst very formidable candidates. That said, although I had the confidence of the shareholders and I had the required skills and experience that they were seeking, there was still something amiss, and I felt rather unsure. I didn't feel the confidence that I felt previously in work situations. Looking back, I think I probably had imposter syndrome. And that's when by chance, I came upon Women on Boards. And just the word got my attention. Women on boards, and I felt there has to be something here that can help me. And when I researched further and delved into it, not only was I glad I found out about WOB, but I was quite relieved. And that's how my journey with WOB started.
So what interested you in board roles? You took the first role on with the school. You obviously have enjoyed it. How do you see them fitting into your consulting/executive career?
So what interests me in board work and governance work is, having worked in accounting and finance roles for most of my life, I find work in that sphere to be quite prescriptive, process-driven, and there's a lot of focus on compliance and controls, and it's restrictive, so to speak. By contrast, I find governance work refreshingly unpredictable. And I love the fact that you have to consider differing viewpoints, sort of engage within your own thought process, weigh the pros and cons, and then articulate your position in a convincing manner. That is very empowering. And to the point that I actually get excited when I click on a new board pack. And as for how it fits in with my day job, I'm fortunate that it fits in quite well because I have my own consultancy firm, my working hours are flexible, I don't necessarily have a boss that I report to. So I make my own hours and I carve out the time required for governance work and juggling this household matters and the kids and all in the equation. So it works well for me. And often I do my research and thinking work into the night. And so far, I've enjoyed the journey.
What sectors are you interested in and why?
You could say I cut my teeth on the not-for-profit sector when I first joined the board of John Paul College, and I still have a strong affinity to that sector. I also find that organizations that have a purpose towards making a difference in the world are most often not-for-profit organizations. And having been in the governance space for a while, my personal belief is for a director to make a meaningful and authentic contribution, the organization's purpose has to be congruent with the director's own personal values. And I find that in the not-for-profit space, there are many organizations which resonate in that way. I particularly have a leaning towards organizations that are engaged in education, in empowering women, and those that do work in the diversity and inclusion space.
So where do you see yourself in 5 years' time?
Well, that's an interesting question. In 5 years' time, my plan is that more than 50% of the work I do would be governance related. That's sort of a measurable goal that I have in mind. And the other thing I see myself doing is empowering and mentoring women of color to take on board roles. Being a woman of color myself, who has adopted Australia as her home, I know only too well what it feels like to be on the periphery, to not be sure whether you belong or not, to be uncertain, and to have to constantly prove that you're good enough to be considered for certain positions. That is exhausting. And sometimes it is quite discouraging. So I would love to be able to empower women who are considering board positions or who think that they can never break that barrier, that ceiling, to encourage them and welcome them, and to give them whatever tips and skills that I may have gained along the way to help them to take that leap. And another area that I see myself working in is community projects and work related to the the community. Like currently my daughters and I do a lot of community work and helping feeding the homeless and things like that. So without going into too much detail, because there's a saying that the left hand shouldn't know what the right hand does, I would suffice to say that I strongly believe how empowering it is to educate women and to break stereotypes and give them the opportunities to realize their full potential. And I would love to spend more time and energy working in those areas because I feel that that has huge consequences across society in general. Lastly, I would like to see myself engaged more in the arts. Recently, I took part in a production of Brisbane Arts Theatre, Much Ado About Nothing, which really revived my love for the theatre, and it was lying dormant within me for a while. And in that play, the director very cleverly, through humor, invited the audience to ponder about a very serious issue about domestic violence, including coercive control. And at the end of that production run, I felt so fulfilled and energized that I had contributed in a meaningful way towards sensitizing people about this serious matter that we face in society. So those are the 4 areas that I see myself engaged in.
How has Women on Boards helped you?
Firstly, as I said, the first attraction was the name, that there was a space that was safe for us as women to come, to exchange ideas, to get to know each other's journey, our challenges. So that was hugely uplifting because I felt it was a safe space where I could actually communicate my desire to take on board roles without being considered presumptuous, which I may not have had that confidence if it was just a general forum. And I also found very beneficial the various webinars and workshops that Women on Boards has, especially the CV workshop, which I did with you and Ruth, the Headhunters sessions. And I also must mention that I was massively impressed by how acutely aware Women on Boards is about cultural diversity. It first got my attention when there was a discussion thread on the topic, but I was blown away when then that translated into action and the Cultural Diversity Committee was formed. And I thought to myself, here is an organization that's serious about walking the talk. And for someone like me, that really inspired my confidence, and hats off for taking that initiative and making it known. And I would like those who are watching this to know that that's something that WOB is very serious about.
Thank you. 3 words you'd use to describe Women on Boards?
Empowering, facilitating self-development, and opening opportunities.